Okay, so my name is Ajit Ghuman. I am the co-founder and CEO of Monetizely. Monetizely is a pricing strategy consulting firm. I've been in software and SaaS for the last 16 years. On that slide, right on the left, is me and my co-founder. This is a book. This is the second edition of my book, Price to Scale. If you go to Amazon, you'll find it's not very expensive. These are some of the companies where I've worked with before, and there is a course on Maven called The Art of SaaS Pricing and Monetization that is also fairly highly rated. We now are actually doing free pricing masterclasses every month. So at the end of the presentation, I'll show you the QR code for that. All right. This is exported into Keynote, a PowerPoint exported into Keynote, so some things will get corrupted. So everything is 0.1, but it's okay. So what I'm going to talk about is, I'm going to talk about macro trends very quickly, and to use an understanding of macro trends and what's happening both with software as well as the economy to understand how pricing can help companies navigate and how pricing can be used as a tool to survive. All right. And so we have a 5-step framework that we use when we consult, when we teach. I'm going to put some of the pricing decisions within this 5-step framework so you can see what happens between different pricing decisions, how can one decision versus the other help you in a particular economic regime. And then I'll show you some case studies at the end. So the first thing that I don't think many people understand is that while eggs inflate, while tuition inflates, while medical costs inflate, software is the highest deflating categories, one of the highest. Televisions deflate, toys deflate, but right at that level, software deflates. So I actually pulled this information. There is a chart of this that exists till 2020, I believe, but I went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and I recalculated it. So you will see that blue line, that's the software deflation line. So if software was worth $100 at 2015, today it's about $60 worth, right? And you'll see that red line is eggs. You'll see medical care and tuition increasing. That's artifact 1. Artifact 2 is, this is from Mary Meeker's AI trend report, which shows that models like GPT 3.5 and GPT 4 have reduced in terms of expense by 99.7%. And this reduction is even faster than Moore's law. So we have seen the advent of things like vibe coding. Things that used to take months to develop are being developed in weekends now. My larger argument is that on a category that is already high deflating, you have now set off a deflation bomb. Software is rapidly getting commoditized, and that is going to make the existing SaaS world, existing software world, very hard to compete in, right? At the same time, so this is, not many people understand that software is highly deflating. At the same time, in the recent macro story, the interest rates have gone up. At the same time, the valuation multiple of companies, the blue line shows valuation multiples, that has come down. These are public companies. I'm sourcing this from Jamin Ball's Substack. So once this has happened over the last few years, the free cash flow margin, the companies cut costs, they did a lot of stuff, and they started to increase free cash flow. So this whole deflation thing is happening at a time when the interest rates are higher and the liquidity is already low. So everybody is feeling pinched, both from the top end, because nobody's willing to pay for software, as well as for like how costly things are going to be. And not only is SaaS, running a regular SaaS company costly, running an AI anything company is going to be costlier. So my central narrative here is that everybody is going to feel this pinch. Many companies will just die away. And the companies that survive really have to figure out how do you stay between these two lines, because the old world of software had low interest rates. They had some deflation, but it was nowhere close to the deflation on price that's happening right now. It feels like a singularity event without people really recognizing it. But yesterday I was talking to somebody, they went to the CRO summit, and they said 40% of people are actually on the bench. They may call themselves fractional consultants and so on. So it's happening, and it may even accelerate going forward. The Federal Reserve debt is at $37 trillion, but actually private debt in America is $150 trillion. This is the Case-Shiller Index, inflation-adjusted Case-Shiller Index, which says that the housing market is more expensive than even the 2008 bubble. Now, when is this going to bust? What is going to happen? We don't really know. But what we know is that there is going to be uncertainty. And whole of yesterday and all of the sessions, if you've attended, people have been talking about that. There is margin pressure. We've known margin pressure for the last few years. And there is falling prices, which I'm proving, which is my contention that we cannot keep charging for software like we do, because there are 10,000 MarTech software, 10,000 sales tech software, and it takes a weekend to build these software anymore. While there is margin pressure, so there is going to be commodity inflation, there's going to be currency inflation, and even if, let's say, the interest rates come down, the bond yields are not coming down because the American credit rating has been reduced, right? So you have to pay more to the person who's holding that. So therefore, for public markets and non-AI software, there has to be a much better focus on cash flow and margin management. A sliver of private AI VC-backed companies will continue to focus on getting distribution. So everybody is in a mad rush to get distribution, and margin is not really that important right now. But tomorrow it may immediately become more important. And software is going to give way, that is our thesis, to more software plus value-added services. Services companies are going to start looking like software companies with more agentic offerings, and software companies are going to look like more services companies. And the second part is what we are already seeing with our client base, that and I'll show you some examples, but for limited price of software, you have a much bigger ticket size for the services. And that definitely was not the case when I started my career in SaaS. Service people didn't even want to add to their P&L, right? It was all the software revenue that people wanted to talk about. So I like to see this as like a regime change. Earlier, we had SaaS with 80+% gross margins. I used to be in a contact center product, running Twilio's contact center product line, 95+% gross margins. In these products, products like these, right, there are some upfront costs, but then the costs don't increase as you are serving more and more customers in regular application layer SaaS. It requires some innovation because there is deflationary pressure. But historically, there was low interest rate, low inflation environment that allowed for big multiple exits and the nature of software that existed. But now AI for SaaS has 30 to 50% gross margin. Even the ChatGPT, the $200 plan, I think Sam Altman sometimes said that they were losing money on it, and they're willingly losing money on it. But it's easy to lose money on this stuff. So there's significant upfront cost, there's significant ongoing cost. So cost is not trivial. And at the same time, what people are willing to spend money on, price of software, is going through a deflationary bomb. So again, you're getting squeezed on both ends. Now, I'm just making the point that this is a completely different regime now. And the old companies are going to be affected because they can't live in the old world. You have to live in the new world. So if you have to live in the new world, you have to have some sort of discipline, some sort of way of running the business. And we are here making a point that pricing is one important lever in you doing that because it affects all different parts of the business. We see pricing as a system. This is a slide by OpenView Partners. I think at some point they had done a study across company sizes, and they proved that after a pricing project, there was a 12 to 50% increase in average ARR and a positive net dollar retention impact as well. So if done right, pricing is an alignment vehicle between your incentives, the buyer's incentive, your seller's incentive. We don't really see it as just a price point thing. It affects too many things downstream. Pricing, the model you choose will affect your cash flow timing, how variable your cash flow is, sales forecasting, financial reporting, investments, your valuation, even the way that you are going to be valued. A usage-based company is not going to be valued like a traditional subscription-based company. Traditional subscription companies were valued based on annual recurring revenue. If it's purely usage-based, where is the recurring? There is no recurring. And I believe Dave Kellogg has some good articles on his blog about this, right? So it is not a trivial matter to say, I'm just going to pick usage-based pricing because I saw this, like this, I'm just telling my life story. And I've worked at Amazon before, I'm a hotshot exec, let's just do usage-based pricing. Who cares about what sales is going to, how they're going to be compensated? Who cares about what systems you need? Who cares about how you're going to be valued? You can't do that. So these are consequential decisions. So how we look at pricing is through a 5-step framework, sequentially. First, we want to look at your goals, a company's goals and market segmentation. I think the context around what is the economic regime that is currently under play is also part of that overall context. Once you set the context, once you set your goals, then you make packaging decisions for those segments. Then you make the pricing metric decision. Within the pricing metric decision, you make a decision, is this metric more outcome-based, or is it metric more input-based? Is it a more of a usage-based variable metric? Is it a more predictable metric? You will hear a lot of buzzwords around usage, outcome, blah, 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 but it is just a pricing metric decision. And you make a list of candidates and you try to see which one best align your incentives with the buyers. Then, only then do you choose the price point at which you're going to sell your product. And finally, you want to make sure that it is operationalized. And the best pricing strategies will not work unless the systems are put into place for them to actually work. So I'm going to walk you through some of the design choices you have based on the economic regime that you're operating in across these 5 steps. So if you have a high growth regime, right, the erstwhile regime, this is also the regime where people talk a lot about product-led growth. I believe in the VIP lounge, there was a book on freemium and product-led growth. A high growth regime is where you want simple tiers, good, better, best. Everybody talks about good, better, best. But it supports high sales velocity. You want more usage-based pricing. You want more variability. You want minimal services because you're just focusing on the software recurring revenue piece, right? And you may not have very complex upsell, cross-sell motions. You may just have, hey, this is our packaging, going to sell fast. And that is the regime we're operating in. That's how we get incented. But if you are in a high margin regime, which is a different regime, now you may benefit from more complex packaging or more a la carte packaging because you're going slow, your sales velocity is slower, you're trying to increase your deal margin and deal size. You may want more ways to have a predictable pricing metric so that you can get cash upfront rather than later down the road, and you can predict and forecast it better. You may want more ROI, like high ROI services that are a natural fit to your product compared to the older ways of working. And you may want a very curated upsell, cross-sell motion, maybe different price books for your existing and new customers so that you can really focus on how are you going to grow NRR. Then this last part, I've never actually seen a company think about it with any sort of consistency. So there are 2 different regimes, and I've shown you that we are moving now to this regime, but some companies still may be in a high growth regime depending on whether they're an AI company. And depending on which one you are in, you might benefit from making different design choices. Feel free to pause me, by the way. I had to start fast because of the AV issues, but feel free to pause me and ask questions. So the first important decision that you will make is the packaging decision. On the left side of this slide, you have high velocity motion. I think of your Netflix. Netflix wants to reach the whole world. They maybe have 1 or 2 plans. On the very right, where you're having like more a la carte packaging, think of companies like ServiceNow, very modular. A deal could be closed at $200K, a deal could be closed at $5 million. And so you really want a way to customize and maximize the deal value. So your packaging is supporting your motion, the motion that you're trying to build, right? So you have a palette, and many people start here with good, better, best. I would prefer people pick good, better, best because it makes sense for their segmentation. What I don't like is people blindly start here, and then they live with default decisions for many years until they keep tweaking this either to the left or to the right. Even on day 1, you have an idea what your segmentation looks like. So an example of high velocity packaging that I like is Figma. This is from their early, like a screenshot from their earlier days. What I liked about every good, better plan looks similar on a screen, but what they had done is they really understood the needs of the people who would be free users, the need of professional designers, and the need of organizations. And they really understood some of those features as opposed to just blindly sorting like, hey, I'll give you advanced analytics and SSO, and now you are an enterprise user. So the understanding of the segmentation really helps with designing good packages. That is regardless of whichever type of package you're creating. So this is an example of high velocity packaging done right. This is an example of messy, low velocity packaging. This is ServiceNow's example. They have a variety of modules, ITSM, ITOM, HRSD, SecOps, and so on. So they're going to customize their deal per customer. There is add-ons and integrations. There are custom AI modules are percentage of base license, not necessarily a fixed cost, so that it scales with the deal size. There is retainers for professional services. There is other types of consulting. There is training and certification. Back in the day, I used to work with a company called Medallia, and this is closer to how we used to scope. There used to be deal scoping teams. Some of our financial services customers were multi-million dollars. Some of our retail customers were 100K for essentially the same software, right? You're trying to figure out how to make a package that works for them. So this is, I believe, the way forward if margin is a concern. If you're going to, you want a product that is more sticky, and if you're fighting commoditization, you'd probably end up going somewhere closer to ServiceNow, but there is a large path in between. So I'm just giving you sort of two sides to it to contrast it. So this is the design choices in the first step, which is packaging. Within packaging itself, now you may start to have different price books. You may have a new business price book where you're still looking for deal velocity with some amount of deal sizing, but you may have a much more complex existing business price book, which is much more granular, and you may make more concessions to existing customers without necessarily telling new customers. You may have completely different price books for new and existing to focus on the NRR increase. Now, I've done this at previous companies, but many companies don't focus on this part a lot. But beyond a certain point, that maybe beyond the 20 million ARR mark, a lot of the new revenue is coming from existing customers. And that's truly in times of crisis or financial recession, existing customers is where you're going to make money. And if you force them into packages that they don't like, then they will likely churn. So, I think I'm speaking for myself and some other pricing people. We also teach a course in pricing. I have a... Okay, repeat the question.
Do you ever advise, instead of creating a custom upgrade for existing customers, grandfathering your packages and putting them into the new packs?
Yeah, so the experience that pricing professionals we've had, like I'm speaking from my experience, I have one who teaches the course with me. He's run pricing at DocuSign, Zoom, Squarespace. Change management of older customers is often very hard. It's easier to say I'm going to move to a new package, but not change your price. But just for the sake of changing price, if I say that, I have to do some calculation, right? At the end of the day, am I going to make money from this? Who are the high-risk customers? Am I going to force everybody or just a few people? And this is the land of hard decisions. And it's fine to make hard decisions, but realize that this is the longest, it takes a long time for this to go through. Like you have to have a plan. Who are the ones that you're going to ask to change? And the only argument I'm making is, one, understand it's going to be long and complex, and two, that there is an overhead cost to running this activity. Because you're not supporting existing clients, you have to take time out. Somebody in your organization has to have these conversations and to deal with the overhead. So it is doable, but companies don't realize what it actually involves to move customers to new pricing and packaging. New business is much more easier.
As you're thinking about the good, better, best packages and exactly what falls in each bucket, what exercise are you going through to actually place feature functions in certain areas?
So with any sort of packaging, let's take good, better, best as an example, right? One of the brainstorms that I do is I just say, let us list down our segments. If there are 3, then there are 3. If there are more, there are more. Let us list down our capabilities in one column, and let us just do t-shirt sizing. Who really wants something? Who's going to pay more for something? What is table stake, like in a spreadsheet? And I'll do that across like PMs, I'll do that across a bunch of folks to just understand needs first before any packaging is created. And then we'll have a discussion. Then we will have principles for creating packages, which may lead to a good, better, best package if there is. But I will try to have a one-to-one mapping between a package and a segment.
And would you take customer feedback during that exercise too, or?
That I would do, how we work is first we do this hypothesis in a hypothesis formation phase. If it is a pricing project, then we run customer feedback work. So if it is large scale, smaller deals, then you may want to do something like a MaxTIF or a Van Westendorp survey, for lack of a better word, surveys, some surveys to get insights. Or if there are larger customers, then primary research. What we do is 1 hour long calls with structured research questions. We do 20 or 30 of those, depending on the size of the company, and then we consolidate the insights.
Okay, cool. Last question, and then I'll be quiet.
No worries. No, don't need to be quiet.
And then what would give you confidence that you have your pricing and packaging correct? What are signals, data points that would...
I think symptoms that things are better, like things are okay, is high customer NPS, good sales NPS, reasonable discount rates across your packages, reasonable NRR and upsell motion, not a lot of shelfware. Those are signs and symptoms of decently working pricing and packaging. Easier to, like, they have the saying, like, all happy families look alike and unhappy families have issues. So unhappy families could have issues like you have highly discounted packages, or some packages are not being chosen at all. And then you have high shelfware in some packages and no shelfware in some packages. You have usage-based pricing, but nobody is actually using the product. There are many ways things can go wrong. Or sales is really unhappy with the pricing, for example, and they go off the reservation a lot. Customers are churning because of pricing. So there are a lot of ways to be unhappy, and there are a lot of those signals. But when pricing works well, the alignment is working well. The customer is not questioning the metric. If they're paying per user, they know that per user is what works for them, and they're happy. Then that is how they do their budgeting. Their package is designed in a way that when they become your customer, it fits their needs. They're not having too much haggling with you. And later on, as their needs grow, you have stuff both in terms of more usage as well as products to sell them as they grow. So that is the sign that it is neatly working within the engine that you've created. Thank you. So I often say that in software, packaging is pricing, right? We spend a lot of time on packaging. One of the misnomers is people talk about pricing a lot, and then there are news articles published, somebody increased pricing this much. Those are generally consumer products for which this news is released. Or sometimes they'll say Salesforce increased the price of their plan. But first you have to see what did they change in the packaging. And for whom did they change it? And those are things that are more relevant, because packaging is how you're going to capture money. Price point is a later on downstream decision. Okay. This slide is about something that we are seeing and what we anticipate. So the first client is a close to IPO cybersecurity company. Their sort of entry-level ARR for their software is around 30K, but a lot of their money is made on 300 to 500K service deals with the customers for security analysts or some other specialized analysts that their clients don't want to hire in-house, and they rely on this company to handle. Another client that I'm working with right now is creating tech software, and they can't just sell agentic software. Like, even if you've seen OpenAI's news, they are creating forward deployed engineers and consultants. So to deploy some of the newer technology, you need services to be a core part of that. And that is the client expectation as well, that you're going to come and do a transformation because they're not able to do it themselves. And you want that so that they start to rely on you, and they can't switch away from you that easily. Finally, this client C was a seed stage cybersecurity company where when we finished our round of 2030 in-person research calls, they highlighted, listen, a small section said, for this type of thing, if you did for me, I would have 4 to 5x willingness to pay, or 2 to 3x for another SKU, which they were not thinking about. So many times when you actually do some of these studies, you will realize not just willingness to pay for what you're offering, but willingness to pay for some niche thing that maybe in the old regime, you were like, hey, I don't know how to repeatably offer that. But tomorrow you might want to do it because that could make or break your P&L.
Is that 6,350? Is that reflecting like the agentic?
No, this is from one of Sequoia's. I was going to come to this. Is one of Sequoia's videos that I took this screenshot. So they were saying when SaaS started, the software market was 350 billion and 6 billion was SaaS. Then it increased to 650 software TAM, and now it's 400 billion SaaS that SaaS does. But 10 trillion is services TAM. And I believe only 20 billion is automated, is the argument they make. And this is where we put all our money. Like, we don't think SaaS survives this in its current state. this is what is happening. We agree that something here is going to happen.
Thank you for clarifying.
Okay, so one big decision was the packaging decision. The other big decision is the pricing metric decision. And basically, you can either have a very fixed metric, such as users, named users, concurrent user, or even on-premise software, or you can have a more variable metric, such as tokens, more usage-based pricing, and so on. Now, given there is a course that we do, there's much more here, but I'm only trying to make one point is, depending on your software, you have to balance your needs with the buyer's needs. For historically, usage-based pricing worked for user-based pricing worked for everybody because you got predictability and it was based on the number of people who use the product. But with more AI technology, the users are reducing, people are getting fired, and you need a way to charge for it. At the same time, your cost of goods sold is much higher than before. So you can't just say per user pricing because you could start losing money. So you have to offer some sort of usage-based pricing. And that is why most of AWS and infrastructure SaaS is usage-based pricing, not because it is sexy. But on that, there are ways to make it more predictable. So you could have the top part, which is a linear tariff model, and you say it's just pay as you go. I'm like PG&E. You keep consuming me and pay whenever you use something. That is definitely a way. What most people are doing is the 3-part tariff, at least in AI, and they say buy this bundle of usage for me upfront, use it, then there will be an overage fee, and then once you use more, buy the next bundle. So that's the cell phone plan model. All generative AI products are on the cell phone plan model, essentially. Or you can have another sort of model, which is the platform fee plus usage. Pay me an upfront platform fee, and then I will charge you usage. But in the world of linear, given I've worked at Twilio, and some of 2-part, what tends to happen is you get money much later, and then you have arguments about your bill was incorrect, there's going to be a lot of overhead, and that's going to affect your cash management later on as well. So this is an example of 11 Labs, right? So this is from their price book. I just plotted this is from their website, this is what the curve looks like. You start using it, you make an investment. After you run out of your credits, it's like an overage slope. And at some point, it's economically valuable for you to be on the next year. Then you start overage, then it's economically valuable for you to be on the next year. This is a way to design a predictable pricing metric with usage-based pricing, right? You can still have usage-based pricing and have predictability. This is the way to do it generally. And most generative AI products, this is how they do it. So just showing you some tools of getting more predictability in the business. All right, the price point. So not going to go too much into the discussion of whether value-based pricing should exist. I'm going to start with the implication, yes, we want to price to value. We should agree that simply cost-based pricing doesn't work unless it's like a very commoditized part or a hardware product or a toy or something like that. And even then you want value-based pricing if you have a brand. So you want to basically anchor on value, but now you have to be much more cognizant of COGS. Generative AI software is much costlier to create. Infrastructure is costlier, data acquisition is costlier, compliance is costlier, and overall margins are lesser, right? And this is like a lot of these vibe coding apps are not really making money, right? Their underlying costs are pretty high. So you have to be cognizant of COGS in this regime. You have to be calculating it. So 2 examples. So I've run through the framework very fast, but more detail is, of course, available in the book as well as on our course. This is a company where I worked and where we should have been in this high margin regime. We were selling to enterprise clients. Our sales team was enterprise. We were custom scoping it. And we had a CRO who came in, and she said that, no, we're going to make cookie cutter packages, many packages, and we're going to sell very fast. But that was not the segmentation or the motion that sales team was used to. What did that cause? It caused customers to not select the middle plans because they were too restrictive for them. Then they went on to the top-end plans because only the top-end plans had all of the features and stuff that they wanted. Then they severely discounted that because they didn't want the extra fluff in the top-end plan. So now you have plans that are not being sold, plans that are heavily discounted, and shelfware so that you cannot sell after the fact, right? That is a consequence of a mismatch in this regime, for example, right? You created a high velocity thing for a company that desired to be high velocity, but that doesn't mean that it was a high velocity company. And it never was in its entire history. That's one example. And this is an inverse example. This is Jan's example from when he was at Zoom. So when the pandemic started, they had this overdeveloped lineup and a lot of add-ons. And this was closer to the high margin regime, right? They're trying to monetize the product more. They're trying to build a lot of stuff. And they eventually ended up with a lot more simplicity. In this case, they did things like a conjoint analysis. And then this was a much more higher velocity packaging that made sense because the market moved to them very dramatically. They didn't need to bother about right-sizing every deal. So examples of how packaging and pricing shifts based on what your goals are. I think that's it. The conclusion, expect severe market whipsaw. Make your bet on the expected regime because you're not going to be able to change your systems, the way you do financial reporting, the way you fundraise very often, right? You have to make a bet. And pricing and packaging is not hard to get right, but it's not a decision made in isolation. It's a decision made in context of how you're operating, where you want to be. And then it's a structural part. It's not a price point decision. It goes along with the overall structure of your company. So that's it. Happy to take more questions. And we do a monthly free pricing masterclass. You can use this QR code to join it. The next one is on October 15th. And this is me and my co-founder if you want to do a consultation. Happy to chat. Thank you.